back when I was a kid living at home, it seems to me, my best recollection is that we had kind of the before Bobs and the after Bobs. Bob and after and Bob and before. Paul and Louise were the oldest, of course, and although Paul was older, she and Paul went to high school at Great Bend, Kansas, and they lived with the Bridens, a family here in Great Bend. In their home, they come home on weekends, and as a consequence, Paul and Louise were co-valedictorians of the senior class graduating from Great Bend High School. So they're both very talented. Louise went on to get her teaching certificate and taught school for many years, during the Depression, I might add, and she was one of the few people in our community able to buy a new car every so often. A new 1935 Plymouth was priced at $495 FOB Detroit. Well, they had some transportation charges on that, but she always had a fine car, and so she was kind of the provider. You would inquire, and her car might be made available. I wasn't old enough to drive in those days, but I recall that Louise was trying to encourage Sister June to go to high school, and June was wavering. She didn't want to go, and so she said, "June, if I make my car available to you," it was a new Plymouth, "would you go to Radium High School so that you need to get a high school education?" She says, "Yes, I'll do that." Louise made that contribution. Back to Paul being the first of the family. Paul was a very debonair young man. He read all the movie magazines. He talked about the movie stars, and he kind of thought he was Fred Astaire because he would dance. He would pick us up. I can remember being picked up by Paul in his arms, and he would dance all around the living room floor and around the people to keep you entertained as a baby, and it was very fulfilling. He did that not only with me, but the other youngsters during that same time frame. Now, Paul was kind of quiet. He was more to himself. Louise was more outgoing because she was a teacher, and she was very generous, very generous. She went to the Chicago World's Fair in 1933, took Brother Russell and a couple of her friends along, and you can imagine what the roads were like back then. But Bub went along as a driver. I wouldn't say that his past driving record was too good, because he had several automobiles that weren't drivable after he had one of his excursions. But anyway, Louise was kind of helping Mother raise the kids. And Sylvia was the one who got involved with a lot of the baby chores. Sylvia was a very sweet girl. She was not the one that was pushed out front. Louise was more foregoing. And June was kind of quiet. But June was a very good-looking girl, and so she could kind of have her choice when they would go to dances. Everybody wanted to dance with June. And she had a high school notebook, and on the front of the notebook she wrote names of young men whom she had met at the dances. And so I recall I got hold of a notebook one day and I memorized some of the names, and so I would call, I'd say, "Have you seen Adolf Siefkes lately?" And she'd go chasing me up the steps, and along with others. Now, you get down to Bub. Bub was he was the sort of the rounder. Bub was always, I was one of his favorites. And as I was growing up, Bub would say, "Bobby, run in, put on a clean pair of Union alls, we're going to go to town. Sneak out, get in the back seat of the car and lay down between the seat and the front seat so that Ori and the rest won't see you and we'll go down. And I must have done that 50 times during my life, where he would be going to Seward for something or another, and I accompanied him. So I was kind of special, and I thought he was pretty special.
So there was Paul, Louise, Bub.
Then we get to, June was in there too. I told you that June went to high school. She was the first to get married. She married Carl Hammer while she was a junior in high school.
Junior in high school?
Junior in high school. And it was a very good marriage. Louis, now let's get back down the line to Ori. Ori was he always liked athletics, particularly baseball. He loved baseball. He was a pitcher. And when he was in Radium, he was a senior, and if I recall right, I was a freshman, but I was the catcher. He would pitch and I would catch. Uncle Johnny would come to the games and they'd say, Uncle Johnny, you do the umpiring. I would protest because Uncle Johnny would call strikes against us that weren't strikes so that he wouldn't be accused of being partial. And poor Uncle Johnny took quite a razzing and a workout when we played ball on those occasions. But it was Ori met Marita Gleason. Ultimately they were married. Dad used to refer to Radium as the A&L Academy, athletics and love. That were the two primary accomplishments for the young members who attended. Now, Gloria came along, and Gloria was sort of leaning toward becoming a nun, maybe. So she wound up going to St. Mary's of the Plains, as did Sylvia. Sylvia went to St. Mary's of the Plains.
In Dodge City.
In Dodge City, and finished out. Gloria had the ignominious experience of having gone through a tornado at St. Mary's Academy that destroyed virtually everything but the people. And there were almost miracles that occurred as a result of something being destroyed totally and something being totally protected. So they've got big stories to tell about that. But then comes along Larry, your dad.
You're between Gloria and Larry.
Yeah, now.
Okay.
And
He's older.
no, I'm older than Gloria, and I'm younger than Ori.
Okay.
So chronologically, it was Paul, Louise, Sylvia.
Bub.
Bub comes in there third. Paul, Louise, Bub, and then Sylvia, then June, then Ori, then myself, Gloria,
Larry.
and Pat Jr. You might be interested in knowing that on my birth certificate, when I was getting ready to go into the Navy, I got a copy of it, and it said Pat Keenan Jr. Born December 30, 1922. It had to be me. We had to go to Dr. Zug, Clark Zug, and he filled out affidavits certifying that I wasn't really named Bob Pat Keenan Jr. So we got my name for the official records converted to Robert Patrick Keenan. With that, I was able to get in, sign up for the Navy, and that's another story. But your brother, your dad Larry was the fair-haired boy. He dated all the girls in the high school class. I saw him one evening walk into the drugstore, go over to the phone, and put a nickel in or whatever it was, and he'd call and he'd talk with one of his girlfriends, and I heard him say, "Well, what about so-and-so? Is she going somewhere tonight?" Well, do you know if Connie's busy? She was a pretty little girl, belonged to Dr. Kendall. Oh, she is, Well, you know of anybody else that's loose tonight in our group? So that's the way he created a lot of his social life. But in high school, he was a holy terror. Brother Russell pulled his irons out of the fire probably a dozen times when they were ready to throw him out of school. He would come to his own rescue, and Brother Russell would say, you see, there are two Lawrence Keenans. There's one down at Seward. Now, he's the son of Lawrence Keenan Sr. He's a troublemaker. He's the guy you're really looking for. It's not my brother Larry. Larry wouldn't do that. But Larry, matter of fact, he was with me this morning at the farm. He wasn't feeling well. That's why he didn't go to school. That kind of got him off the hook. Gloria went to the school, and Pat Jr., he was so far behind me when my mother died. I had got my orders to go into the Navy. I got an extension for a week so I could be there for her funeral. Pat Jr. was about 5, I would guess. I had he and probably your dad were jumping off of this yard swing to see who could jump the furthest. So I had Pat get on the back side of the swing, and I said, I'm going to push you so you go a long ways. So I had him going, and I gave him a hard push. He went flipping, and he fell on his arm and broke it.
That was during the funeral of the mom?
That was, we were waiting for the funeral. And Pat came out of it with a broken arm, and so he had it set, it wasn't set properly, and then he had a lot of problems with it. So if he complains about his arm today, that could still be a part of the problem.
Okay, that's the family then. Paul, Louise, Bub, Sylvia, June, Ori, you, Gloria, Bob, Larry, and Pat.
Mm-hmm.